Well, it is Wednesday, November 9th, 2016, and we've just elected Donald Trump to be President of the United States of America. The title of this is A Message to My White Liberal Allies. Now, I don't usually wear a mask, but I'm doing this as a kind of satirical thing about the kind of nation we've become, the kind of people we're becoming, and the kind of fear that dominates the conversations in the 21st century political discourse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Brandon Easton. Some of you know me, some of my buddies will probably be the only people who ever actually watched this video. But I am a progressive-minded person. I'm not the most liberal guy in the world, but I definitely believe in equality and forward momentum for a society. The problem that we're facing today is a massive crisis of understanding, a massive crisis of self-reflection. Now, before I get into all this, I want to say something about who I am. Now, some of you may know me, but most of you, hopefully, you do not, meaning that this has gone viral. But I'm not the kind of person that believes in anybody giving me anything. I'm somebody who had his family destroyed by drug and alcohol abuse. I'm somebody who comes from a family, a working class blue collar family of longshoremen and military veterans. And we were all hardworking. We are all hardworking people. We're 100% African American, and we busted our asses over the years until, the aforementioned drug and alcohol problems destroyed my family. I left home at the age of 16 and 17 to live with other people, and then I ended up putting myself through college twice. Well, technically three times. I have two master's degrees, and I have a bachelor's in sociology. I'm a former New York City public school teacher specializing in history and economics. I tend to look at things in a much larger context than the average person because of my history background. You have to contextualize everything that's happened in the last 24 hours in the grand, larger picture of history. This is not by accident. This is not something that was a shock. Many of us could see this coming. I feel that I was blindsided by the fact that so many white women went out and voted for Donald Trump despite all the horrible sexist and degrading things he said, and his behaviors toward women are just reprehensible. I mean, I don't even know how women could do that. White women specifically could do that, but that's who they voted for. White women voted for, in great numbers, Donald Trump to be president of the United States. So I have some talking points that I want to gear toward my white liberal allies who are somehow stunned or shocked that Donald Trump was able to pull this off. Number one, and I just mentioned it, white women came out and to vote for Trump, and I think the question you have to ask is, did white women value their gender or their ethnic background more? And obviously, it's ethnic background. White women chose to identify more as white than as women. Not all white women, but the ones who voted for Trump, which clearly he won, and the exit polls clearly did not lie, these women voted for Donald Trump. There is this massive fear, and some people believe, I'm not one who generally believes this, but there's a great belief within the community of people who criticize feminism, modern feminism, from the prism of upper middle class white women, that feminism in and of itself does not properly challenge the intersection of race, class, and gender. It basically becomes a contest of how rich and how privileged white women can become. Unfortunately, that's a lot of what modern feminism has devolved into by placing whiteness over equality. And when you have women who have daughters who are thought of as sexual objects and thought of as potential, prey for men who think like Donald Trump, and they still vote for Donald Trump, it is 100% clear beyond any stretch of the imagination that whiteness trumped, no pun intended, but whiteness trumped gender equity. Sociologically, that is a nightmare because it leads to a fascist mindset that centralizes nationalistic feelings of white oppression. White people feel oppressed despite being in control of just about everything in the United States. It is a very strange phenomenon. It is a phenomenon that Fox News and people like them have been putting out there for the last, I'd say, 20, 25 years. I mean, the rise of Rush Limbaugh and his people and his style of vicious right-wing stupidity took hold around 1994, and we've been living with that nightmare since 1994 on the contract on America. So probably, some people call it contract with America. It was a contract on America, on American sovereignty and American decency. And that's all gone now, as of last night. Another thing I want to talk about is even though Donald Trump is president, and will be president in January, I should say, Wall Street is what really controls this society. Anybody that tells you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. Wall Street wanted the Iraq War. Wall Street wanted the prison industrial complex to build. Wall Street wanted our educational system to fall apart. And that's what they got. They got everything they wanted. Trump, for all his talk, may not be able to implement many of his policies because they might fly in the face of Wall Street money making. And if that occurs, he will be kind of deadlocked into behaving in the ways that they want him to behave. And that means, very simply, that Trump can't build a wall, and Trump cannot do mass deportations, and Trump cannot effectively ban Muslims. Even with a Republican-controlled House and Senate, there still can't be that kind of situation. Another factor is the same Republicans who've helped to create the problems that exist were reelected. Those people are back. The people who he claimed to want to drain the swamp of are still in Congress. They're still all around him. They will be around him. So who knows what kind of president we're going to have. But you have to understand that Wall Street and big finance and big banks have an incredible amount of control over the presidency and our policy making. So think very carefully about that. Understand that it won't be as bad. It's not going to be good. Don't get me wrong here. It's going to be pretty goddamn bad. But it won't be this apocalyptic fascist regime that people think it will be, because Wall Street has too much tied up into keeping things the way that they are and making themselves more money. So as long as you keep that in mind, there's some hope that you can't get as bad as that we imagine them to be, because Trump has to deal with Wall Street, and money is pretty much everything. Now, I'm a solution-oriented person. Earlier I spoke about my struggles in life and the things I've achieved, and I didn't say that because I wanted pity or I wanted people to pat me on the back. It's just a statement of fact. These are the things I've achieved in life. I am a solution-oriented person. I'm not really big on bitching and complaining and whining. I like to solve problems. I feel that a lot of liberals and a lot of people of color, to be absolutely honest, get on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and share memes, and that's their only way of, protest. You actually have to fight and put yourself out there and actually go vote. The 2018 midterm elections, which as of now about obviously 2 years off, will be our opportunity to put a stop to any negativity that Trump attempts. We can put Democrats or other people in 2018 to make a fundamental difference in this election, in this country, in our society. Trump has potentially 2 to 3 Supreme Court nominees on the horizon. He also has the ability to make changes in abortion rights, make changes in immigration, and the immigration system needs to be fixed. But the criminal justice system needs to be fixed, as well as our educational system desperately needs to be fixed. As a former New York City public school teacher, trust me when I say we have problems. After living here in Los Angeles for about 8 years, the public school system here has problems. Our educational system in the United States of America is deeply broken and twisted. And what we've got to do is get serious about it. We've got to get serious and start doing things. We can't sit on our asses and whine and bitch and complain. We have got to start voting. We have to start organizing. And if that doesn't work, run for office yourself. Even if you don't win, you get exposed to the process, which makes you a more informed citizen, which gives you power. We have considerable power that is being taken away because we don't act on it. We've got to do something. You can't sit around and bitch and complain and make platitudes online and post memes on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Fuck that. It is time to do something. We can't stop Trump from being president, but we can make it as hard on him as the Republicans and a lot of voters made for Obama when they didn't like him. They didn't like where he was going, so they put people in to obstruct him. And we've had some of the greatest obstructionism in the history of American political society. I mean, period. Like, it's just insane how President Obama was obstructed. But people, executed or, their constitutional right to vote and organize. And they did it. The Tea Party, all those people, they all got off their asses and did something. It's time for us to do the same. For people who want to believe in a true future, a human future, a dignified and decent and empathic future, you've got to do something. You can no longer just post memes and click likes and share shit. Get off your ass. Do something. I'm talking to all the liberals who bitch and whine and complain on Twitter all day, who are bitching and stunned today. Get off your ass and do something. That includes you, my white liberal allies. You can't sit around and think, oh, well, we will just have to support him. No, you got to do something. The next time you hear somebody making a racist or sexist or homophobic joke, do something. Stop sitting there and assuming that everybody is intrinsically good. People are not intrinsically good. People are self-serving. If altruism is in some way going to help somebody, then they'll be nice. But we are dealing with a good chunk, and a massive chunk, I should say, of our society that is struggling right now. There's a large portion of poor rural whites, regardless of their educational background, who've had their entire lives snatched away. I've had the opportunity to live in 5 American cities or towns. I was born and raised in Baltimore. I went to college in upstate New York in Ithaca, and all this is going to become important in a second. I lived in Boston and dealt with the Irish and Italian working class, blue-collar working class of Boston. I lived in New York where I dealt with everybody, and out here in Los Angeles I deal with a lot of so-called pseudo-liberals and a lot of recent immigrants who have some very serious issues. Okay? The reason I brought up where I lived is that I've had the opportunity to meet different kinds of people. I grew up with poor working class whites who, along with my grandfather and other family members, worked in the shipping industry and the port industry of Baltimore. And that industry went away, and these poor whites suffered tremendously. And when you have large portions of our society who lived in towns that were based upon one industry, whether it be factory, it could be like a soup making factory or automotive factory or textiles or clothes or drilling or whatever it is. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, allowed a lot of these companies to just go overseas. What do you think happened to those small towns that were dependent upon that one industry? Ithaca, New York, where I went to college, Ithaca and Cornell University are both there. That town is completely reliant upon those colleges. And if Ithaca or Cornell decided, or both of them decided to leave, Ithaca would become literally a ghost town, a town of lost dreams, a town with no way of generating income. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands of towns like that in the United States of America that are populated by poor whites who are, like I said, have various levels of education. You can't assume all rural people are low educated, because that's a big mistake people make. But you have this population who has been ignored and made fun of for about 30 years. And when you have people like that who have been virtually ignored, and I'm not saying they're right, some of them are complete racist scum, some of them are sexist, homophobic scum, some of them use religion to hide their biases and bigotry, but then there are some who are actually hardworking people who just are terrified because they have no future. They have no way to provide for their families. 30, 40, 50 years ago, these people may have still been racist, sexist, and homophobic, but they were working all the time, so they didn't have time to go home and get on to social media. There was no social media, but they didn't have time to organize. They just went to work, went home, provided for their families. Some of them were Klansmen, but the majority of them were not. So it's very important to understand how someone like Trump can come along, who's big on rhetoric but doesn't offer actual solutions, to people who are starving and suffering and terrified and feel like their way of life has gone away, because in a lot of ways it did go away. They can't work. I'm not saying it's right for them to be racist. I'm not saying it's right for them to have all these ridiculous biases. But someone like Trump comes along and suddenly he seems like a savior. He comes along and he talks about these issues. He talks about how they've been ignored, about how big fat cats in Washington and the elites on the East and West Coast ignore them and make fun of them. And guess what? He's not wrong. People call Trump land now, what they're going to call it, flyover states. A lot of so-called liberals I know constantly make fun of the rural poor. And I don't think they understand because they haven't lived it. Way too many of my white liberal allies live in bubbles. They surround themselves with other white people who don't have a lot of experience with other types of people at all. And they come up and they create this false perception of reality where they believe everybody's fair-minded. They believe that everybody has a fair shot. They completely ignore their own white privilege to the point where they perpetuate, especially in Hollywood. I mean, I'm a TV writer and I also work in comic books. I deal with this type of person a lot. They don't quite get how they are contributing to the problem of stratification by simply not including other people in their circles. White liberals need to really start to connect with their own brethren who are poor, who are rural, their own family members. They've got to do it. You have got to do it. It is now on you, because I truly believe that white people don't listen to blacks, especially specifically African Americans. We've been saying that shit has been bad for about 350 years. Jim Crow, post-Reconstruction era. We've been talking about this shit forever. And now that the poor rural whites have spoken in great numbers with great vociferous force, that a lot of white liberals are sitting around stunned and shocked that people can be that racist and homophobic and sexist. Yeah, no shit. We've been saying this shit for years. Now will you fucking listen? Now is your chance to do something. Stop being afraid. Stop hiding behind your little bubbles and your little communities. Get out there and talk to people. Start organizing. Start pleading your case. Because right now, we're fucked. It might not be as bad as we imagine, but it ain't going to get better. Whatever Obama's forward momentum, whatever forward momentum he achieved, that shit's gone as of January. So, what are our solutions? Again, I'll say 2018 midterm elections are going to come along. They're going to make a huge difference. They can make a massive difference if we decide to make it a difference. We've got to get off our asses, and I'm talking to the blacks and Latinos and other people. You got to get off your ass. You got to make things happen. You got to stop doing memes and clicking likes and get out there. The reason why Trump won is because people went out there and organized the shit out of themselves. People went out there and worked really, really hard to make sure that Trump won and that his message got out there. If you believe in honesty and decency and empathy and fair play and leveling playing fields and shattering glass ceilings and making a better world for your children and our children and the children around the world, do something. Start talking to people. Start connecting with more people outside of your circle. If you're in a position to hire people of color and women, for fuck's sake, hire qualified people of color and women. We need to start transferring wealth, creating wealth, generating wealth. If you're a white liberal and there's a black-owned bank nearby, put some fucking money in that bank. Start patronizing, whatever the fuck that word is. Start supporting businesses of color. Start supporting businesses that are owned by white women who did not vote for Trump. That's the only way things are going to change. We have to start generating wealth among people who believe in honesty and decency and fair play and empathy. The problem is white liberals keep their wealth, the white liberals with money, they keep their wealth centralized in their circles. And it doesn't allow other people to move up, to make positive changes, to make just move our society forward. We can't keep living in our little bubbles. So to my white liberal allies, you shouldn't be shocked. There's about 400 and something years of history that is a preface to this. If you're a millennial and you don't care about history, you need to fucking learn. As a former history teacher, all this is perfectly contextualized for me. There are thousands of free YouTube videos that can contextualize this shit for you. There are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of books about history that contextualize this shit for you. None of this is in a vacuum. Poor whites have not suddenly become villains. Most of them are not villains. Most of them are desperate and terrified and shocked at how much our country has changed. They don't know what to do with themselves. So they feel that Trump can give their country back to them. But there was no country to give. This country has always been the same. We've all been Americans, like it or not. So when they say take our country back, my question is, take your country back from what? Muslims don't control anything in our society. Some businesses, but they don't control legislature. African Americans have some businesses. They control very little legislature. Latinos own some businesses, control very little of the legislature. So who's out there that could really make a difference? Our white liberal allies. You guys have money. You guys have influence. You guys have connections. And other white people will listen to you, regardless of what you think. Because they sure as the hell ain't going to listen to us. It's going to be an interesting time. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be sad. And it's going to hurt. Worst case scenarios are, the return of fascism. Maybe this is Germany in 1932. More pragmatic is police brutality will continue unabated. The federal government won't do much about it. Can't do much about it. We won't really do any retraining of police. I don't know about the wars, foreign policy, because Trump knows nothing about foreign policy clearly, and I don't know what's going to happen with our allies overseas and internationally. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be rough. In the meantime, let's start looking toward 2018. Let's start looking toward organizing. Let's start looking toward having frank conversations about race. White liberals, I feel, sometimes are more racist and more problematic than anybody else because they don't see themselves as contributing to the problem. You are contributing to the problem. Every time you don't stand up for equality, every time you laugh at a racist joke, every time you laugh at or make a racist or sexist joke or homophobic joke, and sometimes, we're all saying crazy stuff and we all laugh, but when it really counts, for the people who really believe those things, you cannot enable racism anymore. You cannot enable sexism anymore. Many of you have daughters. Many of you have friends of color. Some of you are married to people of color. By all means, step up. Stop fucking around. Be honest with yourself. Challenge your own racism. Challenge your own sexism, your own homophobia. Stop pretending you don't have these feelings. This is what has allowed people like Trump to fester and take root, because we're not standing up. We're not having honest conversations about race. We're not having honest conversations about how we really feel about women in our lives, how we really feel about gays, lesbians, transgender folks, bisexual folks. We're not having those conversations. And in the vacuum, the sociological and political vacuum of those conversations, people like Trump can take hold and fester. Poor rural whites and working class whites and suburban whites who feel like their universe is ending. In that vacuum, this is where they have come for refuge, in people like Trump. Because we're not being honest. We're not having honest conversations. We're not being real with each other. Beyond that, I don't know what else to say. All I can do is get up every day, continue writing, continue working, doing everything I can do. I can no longer pretend that most white folks have our best interests in mind. And this is, again, no disrespect to the people who do have our best interests in mind, but clearly there's a massive population of whites who simply don't get it, or refuse to get it, or are too afraid to get it, because it would mean fundamentally challenging themselves. And as we've known, Americans are not the most introspective people on the planet. So with that said, I'm going to get back to doing what I have to do. I have bills to pay. I've got scripts to write. I have deadlines to meet. All I can say is I hope that some of us can take hope in 2018. I hope that some of us can just continue to live the life we are living. But I want to leave you with the fact that America has been this way for a long time. Voting patterns haven't always indicated that, but America's been very racist, very xenophobic, very sexist, very homophobic for a very long time. The only way to change that is with honest dialogue, with self-introspection, deep self-introspection. Well, I guess that's redundant. Deep introspection. And a sense of freedom. Freedom of being afraid, freedom from being afraid of being called racist or sexist or homophobic or classist. You know, if that's what you are, you know it's wrong. So deal with it. Start building a new America, a real America. Because what we've got now is a fascist fantasy. We've got to step up. So God bless us all. Take care of each other, please. You know, if you see somebody being harassed, please step up and do something. If you've got the ability to hire people, to promote people who are qualified, please do it. That's the only way we can start moving forward and building wealth and building a society where everybody can benefit from the promise of America. Take care of yourselves.